ready your research so that you can claim it.
Exactly.
Awesome.
We just put it right on there. That's what we'll do. That's what we'll do.
But just claim the research?
No,
Paul's written a book in another name,
yep.
and that'll be his research. So everything he say can be backed up by points
and wikis. I'm just going to create a wiki.
Spoiler
room wiki.
The joys of aliases. Let's fire this up and let's get there started.
Fire it up. Honda.
Yes, folks, it is another It Came from the 50s special. I am your host, Mark, the Movie Man. Welcome to the Spoiler Room, and we are kicking off this month of Godzilla films. Yes, that's right. Godzilla Month has come. I was deciding for a while a theme month, and I thought this fit in well considering Pacific Rim 2 is coming out this month. There's talk again of the new Godzilla film next year, and well, I was like, what more month would it be appropriate than this month to talk about it? And what better month to talk about this great monster film from 1954. At least I think it's great. We'll find out what my fellow crew members think of, and I've got a great crew assembled tonight. First off, we have the diva of the spoiler room. She is here with us. Hello, Dawn.
Hello. Good evening, gentlemen.
How you doing tonight, Dawn?
Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic. Good to hear. And next to Dawn, it is the Bowtie Man himself, the one and only Paul Salzer. Hello, Paul.
Hello. How are you?
We're doing well. Glad you could join us for our Godzilla month, and especially for this episode. And next to him, coming off of the stage just last night, he's got that fresh stage smell. It is none other than Doctavius. Yes, Doc is here with us. Hello, Stephen.
Hello. How's it going?
How's that aroma, that stage aroma for you?
Last night I got to play the director that's in the play. There's a play within a play, so I was the director of the play within the play. But wow. I was trying to pretend to play the director of our play while I play the director of the play in the play.
Sweet Jesus, we could tell you like Monty Python. Anyway, yes, folks. I like that.
That may have even made sense. I'm not so sure.
That did make sense. That did. It's like the, modern major general thing. But tonight, we're not talking about generals. We're talking about Gojira. Yes, Godzilla from 1954. The Japanese version, not a Godzilla King of the Monsters, but we will be bringing up that film tonight. So who here wants to give a summary of the plot of Gojira?
Okay.
Go, Doc.
Underwater H-bomb testing may or may not have opened up a underwater cavern where creatures from the past exist. One of them is mutated by the radiation and steps over Tokyo and burns what he doesn't crush. And in the middle of all that, there is this really quiet love triangle and a doctor who's working on a weapon he has accidentally come across that he realizes will be a weapon of mass destruction if used inappropriately, and is desperate to not have that happen.
That he is. And yes, I hear the sounds. He has joined us as well. It is the BFD. Mr. Glenn Bittner has also joined us here to talk about Gojira. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
Yes.
Sounds about right.
It sounds about right. Awesome. So we've got our Japanese version here, which, yes, folks, we are bringing up the U.S. one, completely different edit than the first one. And since we all are not that old, am curious of when you first watched this film. So, Dawn, we're going to start with you. When was the first time you actually watched Godzilla from 1954?
I actually saw this quite a bit later than I saw the King of Monsters version. And I remember not understanding what all the hype was about until I saw this version, the 1954 unedited Japanese, and I absolutely loved it. But I saw this later on, I think when I was in high school, and all I had ever seen prior to that was the Raymond Burr version, which, as we talk about that later, you'll understand why I was less than impressed.
Nice. And Glenn, how about you? The first time you saw the 1954 Godzilla?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can remember exactly the first time I saw it. I mean, I was probably 7, 8 years old.
Oh, nice.
Catching it on on one of the probably Super 18 WVTV in Milwaukee is most likely. I mean, I know I've seen it multiple times as a kid on different horror hosts and just on late night TV. I mean, I remember when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, I would get to stay up late sometimes on Friday nights waiting for my dad to come home who worked second shift, and then we would watch movies at at 1 a.m, which would inevitably be either a John Wayne flick or or something with Godzilla. So
that's not a bad movie night, Godzilla or John Wayne. I mean,
yeah, pretty much.
Paul, how about you? This version of Godzilla, you remember when you first saw it?
I think I was in Palmyra, or possibly even before that on TBS at one point, possibly. Yeah, along with that and the like Ultraman, those two guys. I pretty much merged my entire those two types of characters together. And today was the first time I watched the Americanized version. I knew it existed, but I never knew about how. I just assumed that it was the same thing. So, but I didn't realize that it was actually kind of kept separate. So when we get to it, we'll definitely dive more into it, I'm sure. So
yeah, we'll definitely dive more into it.
Yeah,
and that I am impressed that you had gone that long without actually watching the King of Monsters.
Yeah, it just never. I guess it never was one of those ones that I would have. It never got on my radar and said, "Hey, you should really watch this." It's like you watch all the other ones and you just kind of ignore it because it's like, "Oh, I already watched the original," not thinking that.
Well, two different versions. Yeah,
that was supposed to be the same, or so. It's like what?
Octavius, how about you, sir?
I don't remember when I first saw King of Monsters. I know there was a period where 54 wasn't very available in America, at least not legally. Mm-hmm. And King of Monsters actually, I think, was out of print for a while. And then I want to say it was the mid to late 90s. Toho started restoring everything. And they had retranslated 54, and it played at the times here in Milwaukee. So I got to see it on the big screen for the first time. And I recommend that wholeheartedly.
I was there. I saw that too.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Is it different with an audience? I mean, is the audience reaction a big draw for the film?
Not for 54 so much.
Not for 54. No. Okay.
I saw Destroy All Monsters with a group, like a Friday night freak show.
Yeah.
And everybody was in the mood to have fun. That's a totally different experience. Yes.
When we get to it later in the month, I'll describe my experience with Godzilla 2000. So,
yeah.
Ooh, foreshadowing.
Yeah. If we get to Godzilla 2000, I forgot if I put that on the list or not.
Yeah, it was on the list.
It is.
It was on the list.
Okay, good. It's on side. Oh, it was on the list.
I think the only other one on the list that I have access to at the moment. So.
Cool.
And then in a few years later, you can sell the rights to the podcast to a company overseas, and then they could do their foreign version of that podcast.
I like how you think, that forward thinking. So here we are, Godzilla 1954. We're looking at, it's not that far away from the end of World War II. And the film, this original film now opening's very different. We've got a boat on the shore. We get bright flash and a shockwave, and yeah, Glenn, are they? This whole film is kind of a metaphor for the atomic bomb, isn't it?
What? Yes, very, very much so. And I mean, fitting seeing as this is 10, not even 10 years after Kapow.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's not a single person in this movie, for the most part, who wasn't alive when that happened.
Yeah.
Except for like little kids, but no one counts kids. So, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely 100%. This is atomic bomb. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, even if memory serves, that some of those ship scenes are what was it? I think the Lucky Penny was the name of the ship in real life. There was an H-bomb test that happened too close to a boat and, injured a lot of people or killed some of them, if memory serves. So that's part of the origin of the story. It was a real life event with a bomb.
Yeah. So right away, this film opens. And Dawn, can you imagine how this film opens with your audience who are not even 10 years removed from something very similar from happening? The way they play this out, isn't it really implied this is a bomb that's going off in the opening of the film?
Oh, absolutely, and I think we've seen it more recently too, to an extent. Back when things were reflecting too close to the whole 9/11 thing, we still remember that, and we still draw parallels to that, and that was devastating, but not anywhere near as devastating as the bomb.
Right. And
so
yeah.
You can definitely imagine how traumatized the audience was and how very quickly the audience drew those parallels in viewing.
Yeah, which really puts this film opens, and the context it gets put into is completely different than the tone that is set really by King of Monsters with Raymond Burr's really unenthusiastic voiceover. So we get this scene. Paul, what about you too? Do you think this film really, because you're a horror guy, we're all horror fans here, but you definitely, that's your genre. What do you think? Could you imagine this falls really in serious horror for them, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes. Just from the standpoint of having cinematic therapy, this is the film they needed at that time to kind of release all that angst that they had, because not only is this showing them and the rest of the world the effects of what nuclear radiation can do, but they also had the ability to kind of see kind of the revenge factor. Like they can put themselves in the role of Godzilla and kind of destroying, and they can pretend that, this force of nature is hitting back at man-made, testing. And it was their way of basically fighting back against the bomb that we dropped on them. So I think it's a good time for that film. And then, like I said, it's cinematic therapy, and that's what horror should be really about for a lot of people, is that they can live out these like emotions and just release them in a environment that it's safe to release that type of emotion, especially when the stereotype of a Japanese person is, keep it in, don't let it. And so, yeah, having a movie like this where they could just kind of release out, it's great. It's great.
Well, and then this opening really,
the flash,
with the flash and the shockwave, it was like, it kind of brought me back to, I'm like sitting there going, why do I suddenly get the feeling of influence from Mr. James Cameron in Terminator 2? In a way, how that was handled as well. I mean, that opening of a nuclear bomb going off, basically, and it's pretty frightening. And in here, this whole film's taken rather seriously, I thought, especially with this opening. And then it starts to get political, as Dawn pointed out, with how they handle the shipping company and how the public is handled with news of survivors. Doc, what do you think about that? How that's portrayed? Because that suddenly comes up kind of quick with how they're handling the ships continually sinking in the ocean by this big glowing spot.
I did find it fascinating, the argument amongst, I'm assuming they were all politicians. I'm not
I think there
It's
were
one of
business
those-
owners and politicians. I think.
Yeah, that could be because it seems like it's this mix because there's that group of women in the room at that point, and I just love that one who just keeps going, no, we have to tell everybody the truth is the truth. And it's just like, this is 1954. That's so awesome. To have this woman just going, no, we're not going to handle, you're not going to take your crap anymore. And I'm like, wow, that was very refreshing. I forgot about that part.
Yeah, because that's the scene after the after Godzilla had his first attack. When
Is that as late as that already? Okay.
That was late as that.
I'm mixing parts of the story up
politicians.
apparently already. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's okay. You jumped ahead. That's okay. We could talk about that part. That's fine.
There's even when you're talking like in the shipping office more that area.
Right in the shipping office when they had the business guy and they were keeping them. They're like, oh no, we're not talking, and they keep sending more ships and ships keep sinking.
And again, to go that kind of feeds with Paul's point then too, that because again there is that perception that kind of like the English that the Japanese are a very reserved people, but it's all very emotional. Their reaction to the potential loss of their families, their husbands, and again after World War II, they might have been in a position where they thought they were safe for a while that was over, and now again they're losing husbands, they're losing sons, they're losing brothers, and it's starting again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I'm saying, and the government and the shipping agency aren't exactly wanting to release this into the public.
Yeah.
They're trying to hold information again because of that exact paranoia.
Yeah, they're trying to not just terrify everybody immediately and go, yep, we got a problem. They just, because they don't know to some degree.
Well, you almost make you wonder, though, with the business guy, if he was holding off on it too, so, it wouldn't ruin his business.
That's also some of it. It's fascinating how quickly some of this goes, too. When they go to Oda Island and everything, and the old guy's just like, yeah, it's Godzilla.
Yep.
I had totally forgotten about that part because it's like, oh yeah, it's this ancient legend. We used to sacrifice, if the food didn't come in right, we go sacrifice a girl. We just ship her out there, and she just fade into the distance on a raft and all this, and it's so they name it after that. I'm like, holy crap, I'd totally forgotten about that part of this.
It was funny because I was watching the film. I'm glad you brought it up because I'm watching the film, and I'm like, well, how did they come up with the name? In my head while I'm watching this, I'm like, when do they come up with the name? How did they come up? And then literally on cue, that old man busts out, and I'm like, oh. Because
even then when they get later on where they have the pictures and everything, well, in reference to this legend, we're going to call the creature that. And I'm like, wow, okay. Some old dude just raised the flag at the right time, and he gets credit for this, apparently. We're going to call it after that ancient legend from Oda Island. Okay, fine. There's a lot of islands in
There's a lot of islands.
And a lot of myths.
Yes.
A lot of myths.
We're not even to Mosera yet.
Oh, sorry, Doc. Go ahead.
No. I was just muttering about Mosera.
I forgot about the legend part. Glenn, what'd you think about the legend part and how Godzilla gets his name?
Yeah, that's great. And it's just, as Steve mentioned, Doc, whatever you want to be called.
I'm everything.
As one of our drunken bards. As point, I just love how casual it is too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's just sitting there going, yeah, it's Godzilla. I mean, he's not really emotional. He's like, yeah,
there's no doubt.
I love that. Don, he goes, yeah, we used to sacrifice people to Godzilla, but this dance is the only thing left of old traditions. And he almost sounds disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely had that whole. All we need to do is chuck a useless woman on a raft, and all these problems will go away.
But again, if you take it from the standpoint of people recovering from World War II, you have this generation of people that are thinking maybe that they completely had their universe changed after the war.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's kind of feeding on that thing again too. I like that.
Oh yeah, I liked it too. And then, we got our scientist in here who's doing the study on Odo Island. He leads the research team, and he's the one that brings the name of Godzilla back to Tokyo. And it's played by our good man who was in Seven Samurai, And I feel bad. I totally forgot that he was in this film because it'd been a while since I watched the Japanese version. And I looked, I'm like, oh, holy crap. He's going to get the samurai. They're going to go kick Godzilla's ass. But,
that might make a better animated film. Yeah.
That might, yeah. There's Takashi Shimura. Thank you. I always murder names, but I wanted to get that right because I love this actor. I loved him in Seven Samurai, and here he was well cast, I thought. Don't you think, Paul, for this film? Because he kind of gives it some seriousness where you could see the wrong casting maybe take it, kind of in a silly way.
Oh yeah, you needed a serious person in that role, especially one that is trying to convince the world that they need to study Godzilla, and you did need someone that isn't like a mad scientist, because then it would just be he's just drunk, Too much sake. Come on.
We do get a mad scientist in here, though.
We do. So that's why we don't need him. Yeah. We need a serious guy to balance it out. And
he's more of a sad scientist than a mad scientist.
Yeah, I would say that too.
Serizawa is very emo. In a good way. In a good way. I love that character.
Serizawa was crazy, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But I just want to talk a little more about Kyohei Yamane. I think that's Yamane. Thank you,
Professor.
Professor Yamane.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting because it felt like they were trying to kind of talk about, you got two different generations here. You have him who he wants to study Godzilla and figure out why he is able to survive radioactivity. And you've got the younger folks saying, yeah, let's kill him, because the younger folks as kids grew up during the war. And here you have this guy who's lived through the war, and yet he's the one that's going, no, we don't want to go just blow it up. I just thought it was an interesting dynamic. Doc, what'd you think of that dynamic between these two? Because it comes up a number of times throughout the film.
Before I get into that, there is one thing I vividly remember about watching 54 in the theater.
What?
Because there's a continuity gaffe in King of Monsters while he's giving his speeches in front of the politicians and the businessmen and the everything.
Yes.
His tie goes from untucked to tucked because they cut out a chunk. So I'm sitting there in the theater kind of looking at him going, dude, tuck in your tie. And then he did. And I went, oh, this is awesome, because that just felt right to me for some reason. But it's logical. Like you said, it's logical to have that dichotomy, because as the scientist, he's looking at it from the perspective of we need to safeguard ourselves. In that regard, he's on a similar level to Serizawa, but coming at it from a different approach. Because his idea is, if we can learn from Godzilla how to be resistant to radiation, this solves the problem of the bomb. And in his happy mind, that's probably all it'll take. Everything will be better then. The kids, like you say, are more like, no, let's just end this now because of all the destruction. There's a hint of revenge there. And in Serizawa is the other point where, sure, he'd like, if he could protect everybody from the radiation, it'd be fine, but he's accidentally found this thing that's even worse. So the bomb, he knows, is now even second class. So studying Godzilla to find how to protect yourself against radiation does you no good when there's still something. There'll be something else. There's going to be something else, and that's the other main discussion of the film. What do we do with something else? There's always an escalation.
Right, and it's a question of how far you're going to take it, because the scientists know, man, nature of man.
We are weak and we cannot be trusted.
Yeah,
you're going to pressure me into using this, and then what's going to stop me from being pressured into using it again?
Right, so you got a number of different approaches to this, which you can get that underlying theme of their approach to, well, what do we do now that there's the bomb? you know. And yeah, we brought up Serizawa. We'll talk about Emo Phillips here. The professor who first shows up, and man, I tell you, looking at this film, and then you watch the King of Monsters version, you could really tell the difference in American storytelling, especially back then, because we get Serizawa and Glenn. When he first shows up, we have no clue who he is.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Just some guy in an eye patch. But what'd you think of Serizawa? Because he's one leg of the love triangle that is also going on while Godzilla is eating Tokyo.
Yes, which of course is incredibly important. He's interesting. I remember not liking him as a kid because he's the dick that kills Godzilla.
Yeah,
there is that
with his oxygen destroyer. He's the remorseful mad scientist.
Yeah. Do you think they were maybe trying to play maybe an angle of an Einstein type of feel with him? Maybe
very.
Yeah, kind of. There's definitely was the I've created this thing and oh my god, it's terrible.
Right.
So
I must show my fiance just how terrible.
Yes.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but I got a kick out of that. Like, I got to show you something. It's like, look what I can do. I can melt flesh.
Well, and that's the best part about the way they play that at first, because all we know is that something happens and they don't show you that. You only show you that in the flashback. Right. So that makes it that much worse, because as an audience, we don't know what happened yet. We just know it's horrible. Yeah. It's part of the story. This almost plays like a documentary in parts. Like even the way that the love triangle plays out, it's really not melodramatic at all that much. It just feels like people going around, oh, by the way, we're going to do this, and it's like, oh, wait, they're hooking up. It's not like they announce it to fill in the audience. It's just, you go, wait a minute. Oh, wait, she's engaged to the other dude. This is awkward. It's very light in that regard. And not to start hijacking this thought, but from the documentary field, there's a scene, I forget if it's after the first appearance of Godzilla, where it's just a chunk. There's like 3 or 4 people on a train.
Yes.
Reading newspapers and just casually talking about, oh, we may have to evacuate again. I think it's very much the same thing, like I kind of brought up before, where it's the whole, yeah, we've lived through this before. I really don't want to live through this again. This sucks. But it's very matter of fact. There's there's no panic. There's no real fear. It's just, crap, we're going to have to leave town again. This is bogus.
Or go to the shelter.
Yeah.
Because the guy drops that great line. They're talking about it. They're like, oh, I guess we got to find a shelter soon. And the guy like, oh, great. The shelters again.
Yeah. It's that, because I'm 99% sure that's not in King of Monsters, because there'd be no place for it.
No. No, it isn't. That whole scene is just not there in King of Monsters.
There's no need for it there, because that's not a documentary. There's that scene. There's 3 scenes. That one always jumped out at me. Nah, I'll be jumping ahead. No. We'll just keep going. Okay. I'm sorry.
So we have Serizawa. How do you think they handle that, Dawn, with keeping it kind of in the dark with the fish and what actually happens with that weapon? I mean, because we don't really get that till near the end of what actually happened.
I agree with Doc. It was handled very well. The mystery about it let the audience really kind of simmer with what it could have possibly have been. It was obviously horrific, and then he elicits this promise not to tell anybody, which really.
Well, you knew that was going to get broke eventually.
Yeah, but that really did set up an interesting dynamic between the three principles of that love triangle.
Emiko and Serizawa, and I forget what's the gentleman's other.
Ogata.
Ogata.
Thank you.
Yeah, that really did set up quite the dynamic, because you find out through other people talking that Serizawa and Emiko are engaged, but Emiko is with Ogata, obviously in a romantic fashion too. And then she's talking about how she just feels like he's a big brother. And it's just wrong and creepy when you find out that she's engaged to him.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah.
Well,
I think it's kind of implied that her dad set it up a little bit when they were younger or something.
Yeah, arranged marriages.
And she's kind of grown kind of fond of him, but not in love with him type thing as time's gone on.
Well, and that's questionable come the end too.
Yeah.
There's that. That's part
Well,
of yeah.
You bring up the arranged marriage, and Paul, I want to ask you on this one, because I think this is where Godzilla original Japanese version, it playing in Japan, everybody probably knew what was implied with Serizawa and Omika, because in the American version, Raymond Burr has to tell the audience
Yes.
that they were arranged. So do you think that's kind of the cultural thing, where, because they don't mention arranged marriage at all in the original Japanese version, but how do you feel on that? Do you think that that's because it was implied, and if you grew up in Japan, you kind of knew what their situation was?
Yes, exactly. And it also, again, that plays on that whole theme of the old versus the new. So you had this arranged marriage that she was trying to fight against because she had this modern way of thinking there. She was in love with a man and she wanted to be that way, and that represented that new way of thinking. And again, that's contradictory to the traditional ways of thinking. So I thought that was another nice little kind of throwback to that whole theme going on. And yes, like when I watched it, I knew what was going on, because I've seen enough anime, I've read enough manga to know that sort of stuff happened. And so, yeah, it never confused me at all. And I think that it is a cultural thing. That's why they needed the Raymond Burr to tell you that what was going on.
The Raymond.
The Raymond Burr. Either that or the Perry Mason, but
I don't want to go too late tonight, but we're definitely going to get to the American version a little bit, because I
do want to add something about Serizawa though.
Yeah.
Is that and I don't know, we kind of like hinted at it with the whole when you mentioned the Einstein thing, but I thought again that was a very, very important thing that they wanted to tell the rest of the world, that the scientists that invented the bomb, yes, they did that, and they did this thing for science, but they showed a scientist that did something originally for the sake of doing something good, found out that it was going to do something bad, and said, I'm never going to release this until I find something good. And then he ended up just basically, taking the secrets with him, because he knew that there was no way. And I think that was the message to the rest of the world, to other scientists, you really do have to think about what you're going to do, because that whole genie in a bottle, you can't put it back in once you've released it, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
I think his character really emphasized that.
Yeah, I think now that you mention it, yeah, that's a good point. Glenn, do you think that they were trying to maybe portray and give a message to scientists through Serizawa?
Oh, man, it's getting so deep.
Sorry. Well,
possibly.
Yeah. It was either that, or they wanted you to influence Peter Byrne from Dead or Alive in the future with the eye patch.
Oh, God.
Oh, good grief.
Good Lord.
I can't watch the film without thinking of their songs. I'm sorry. Now you won't be able to either.
Yeah, way to go, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, you bring it up though, Glenn. This version is far deeper and far more meaning and dark in tone than the American version. Holy crap!
Incredibly.
Doc, the
almost-
tone of the Japanese version.
Well, I mean, it's as if one country had an atomic bomb dropped on them and the other didn't.
Yes.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
also the other country that did drop the bomb had a little bit of guilt too. So that's why. So you can't show the rest. You know, the Americanized version, they cut out a lot of things, not for the sake of the Japanese. They did it for the American audience because the American audience that just happened too. We knew what happened and we knew what we did, and so they couldn't really like push it in our faces for that reason, you know.
They weren't in a position where they could do that yet.
Yeah,
it was too fresh.
It was too fresh for both sides. Here's
how awful a thing this was.
Yeah,
you may not understand how awful this thing was, and we're trying to show you in suit monster form and how awful this was for us. That's kind of what that. I think King of Monsters moves it to the beginning to make it all flashback. The scene in like the hospital where they're bandaging up, people are asking for water, and I think in King of Monsters nobody dies, where clearly people are dying. It's one of the few Godzilla movies where people die.
Yeah,
it's really creepy. But that's one of those sequence, you know, the mom dies and then the little girl starts crying right away, and it's like, it's okay, you know. Echo's trying to comfort her. That's
that part two where the mother holding her children soon will be with dad, will be with father.
that was one of the scenes. That's one of the three things I wanted, you know, because I'm like, that scene breaks me. I don't have kids, but that's just horrifying to me, because it's just like, nope, I can't run anymore. It'll be okay, kids, and they're just sitting there peacefully waiting. And it's like, oh my goodness.
Well, and
that's the feeling. That's the feeling that so many must have had when they heard the bombs coming down.
Oh yeah, well, you know that's implied, and that is a heartbreaking scene in that, and it's one of those where you're watching it and you're kind of hoping, because monster films in this era, especially later on, some of them, you know, the US ones, they'd have a scene like that, but then they wouldn't actually die. You find out that they survive. You know, later on, you'd get a flashback, you'd see them run across camera or scene, but not this group. This mom and her 3 daughters, I think, or 3 kids.
Yeah,
she's holding them, and you know, Godzilla crispy them, and and that hurts because.
Yeah, because it's like the first time he uses the atomic breath too. It flashes differently. It flashes like the bomb hitting. It's not the normal just radiation. You see people like all of a sudden freeze and turn into like shadows.
Yeah,
it's the imagery is much dark. It's the weirdest thing about it, going back to this, because I said it after I watched it online. You get used to 60s Godzilla where they're space odysseys, and the 70s ones where they're goofy and things like that. They all came from this incredibly dark, horrific film. It's so sad in a lot of ways.
It's a serious film. I mean, yeah, because you kind of forget with the sheer volume of sequels afterwards. You're like, holy man, this thing's heavy, man. I wasn't expecting this amount of weight. Holy.
Movie's as heavy as Godzilla is.
That's heavy as Godzilla is. Who we don't see right away. He's the title character in Dawn. We don't get to see Godzilla for a while, do we?
No, we don't. We get to see his head. And then we get to see his footprints. But yeah, it's a while before we get to see him.
Yeah, but you got the music and you got the footsteps. So
the music, that music.
So what do you think, Don? Do you think this maybe had some influence on a certain Mr. Spielberg and his Jaws?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. There was also influence. There's influence from this movie all over Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you get to the monster type films, you could see where kind of like you've got a Seven Samurai film, and you can see how that influenced directors. You can also see Godzilla actually was a very influential film for later directors of the genre or similar genres. But you can definitely see that. And Paul, what'd you think about not seeing your title character for a little while?
Oh no, I love films that do that. You know, you see that, like you mentioned Jaws, you also see that in the original Alien. Love that sort of stuff because your mind goes nuts trying to think of what's it going to look like. What's it going to look like? You know, is it going to be a mushroom or something? You know, because of the bomb. But no, it was a dinosaur. It's honest awesome. It was like wow. And then when you finally do get to see it, it's like, and also too, it's just like you feel the steps, you know, you're just boom, 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 you know, and it's just like wow. And you love that anticipation. It's like one of the things that my mom tells me about World War II was that she remembers how the planes sounded going over. She's Japanese, by the way. So the sounds that the planes made, she'd hear that, and she said it sticks in your head, and so and you never got to see the planes, and then then you'd hear the explosion, and then you'd see the light, and this is very much what you got to see in the film. Was basically that you hear the sounds, then you get the explosion, and then you see the flash of light, and it's like wow. Whew. Very intense, right?
Holy crap! Yeah.
Wow. That you just added a whole nother level to those seeds as well.
Oh, and when my mom described it, she actually made the sound like, and you could feel it. I feel it in the back of my spine right now when I do that. She looked at me like, it made the sound, and then that's what she thought about, and I was like, oh my god.
Ooh.
Wow.
So they channeled a lot of stuff in this film, you know?
Yeah, and here I was just saying that Steven Spielberg ripped it off for Jurassic Park, but you just took it on a whole nother level right there. Holy crap. That's an interesting perspective, though, but I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because it reinforces what we've all been discussing tonight on what this film is actually about.
Mm-hmm.
But, you have a monster film, so we have special effects. And Doc, what do you think of the special effects in here for 54?
Most of them are pretty good, and some of them not.
The puppet.
I'm not that fond of the puppet. As much as I like the fact that the first appearance of Godzilla is during the daytime, because that's insane. You just don't do that. You use the darkness to cover up all the white, but that's why they used the composite shot that they did. That worked, and then you see the sand in the distance, the tail, and the footsteps and everything, or footprints. But just getting that sneak moment out, and then again, it's apparently a mutated dinosaur. Again, we're back to the old and the new in conflict, and and the destruction of all these, that it can cause. But man, most of the suit work is pretty good because, I forget how to pronounce the Narafuji. I forget how to pronounce his name. I apologize. He passed away last year, and I don't want to disrespect him in the least. But he immediately developed all of that, and he was the first guy to do it like that, and it became the template. Because you can tell just from other suit actors after that they looked at him and his work and said, okay, that is the way to do it. There, you build off of that. But they also use puppets. So there's it's fascinating. That shot of him with the train in his mouth is on screen for like 2 seconds, but that picture is every freaking where. It's even in the Blu-ray case from Criterion. I'm like, it's so not the creature. It's not even any that barely does this, but yeah. And then it's just this dark black night set, and it's going nuts. And the fire, there are a few miniatures that work really well and a few that do not. And sometimes the film speed is at the right speed to make them look not like miniatures, and occasionally it's sped up and it looks like a toy truck. But on the whole, they work more than they don't, in my opinion.
I'll say they work better than actually later on in other Godzilla films.
The budget was big, I think, a little bit different for some of those later ones too, especially when you get to the 70s. They're super cheap.
The suit shots are fantastic. I forgot how good they looked for 54. The medium shot with the puppet, not so much, but the wide shots, I want to just watch that the whole time because you're right.
The shape of the mouth on the puppet is weird.
Yeah,
it doesn't look right. That's the only reason.
Well, and the shoulders are weird too. His shoulders go from being lower to being up.
Yeah,
to being low again. And but I love the wide shots and of him traipsing through the miniature Tokyo. I mean, even for today, that's pretty impressive how they matched the live action with the compositing. Dawn, what did you think of the special effects in here overall?
For the most part, I liked them as well. Mm-hmm. I actually enough to look at into what some of them were, like the towers,
mm-hmm.
the electrical towers,
and
how they did that. I thought that was outstanding, but they had actually made them out of wax and then used some sort of heat gun and really hot lamps to melt them to do the effect. And I thought that was outstanding.
Oh, that's awesome.
Then they sped up the film or something, so it looked like it was happening very quickly, that type of thing?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. That sounds, I can believe that.
And that's what I love about the old films like this for special effects, where they're either doing something that hasn't been done before or they're trying to work with an idea that they saw somewhere else, is that they just get so creative. It's later on in the year when we talk about the Tingler, there's a scene in the Tingler was similar where they get creative with it. And you would like, wow, I never thought of that. Dawn, you mentioned it made out of wax. I'm like, I hadn't thought of that, but that makes sense to do it that way. Glenn, how about you with the special effects in here?
I get a kick out of models. I really do. And the model effects are I love them, even though looking through my, 46-year-old 2018 eyes, it's so obviously models, but I still love it because obviously there's a fair amount of work that went into it to make these models just so you can blow them up. I love that. I mean, I love the effects. I mean, and yeah, for 1954, compared to some other stuff that came even after this, I mean, there are some really awful monster features that were made in like Hollywood.
Yeah,
they don't come close to this.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking giant monster movies. I'm talking just dude in a suit where they couldn't even do it right. So, the effects are great. I mean, especially for 1954, and especially coming out of somewhere that is, not Hollywood.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. This is not your Hollywood studio making something like this. So, which it might have meant they put a little extra care because they don't get to make as many as well. But we got Godzilla traipsing through town. He looks awesome in it. And then we get to the end, as we mentioned, Serizawa and Ugata, they whip it out to see who's going to take the bomb down to, well, not literally, but because they both like Komiko. We've got the love triangle that still is carried out throughout this monster film, which, I understand they wanted to put that in there for the human element. And when you watch the American version, you realize exactly why they had the love triangle in this film. But this final scene where these two go down and they want to set off the gun, and they, as it was mentioned already, they kill Godzilla. Paul, how do we get sequels when they killed Godzilla?
Well, they mention it there that if we continue down this path of science and testing of the H bombs, there's a good chance there'll be another Godzilla. And so, yep, there's going to be another Godzilla come in there, and he'll be a father figure for a lot of people for some weird reason.
It's almost like the ending to It's Alive, Mark.
and there you have it, folks. That Toho still took a page from Hollywood to leave it open for sequels.
Yep.
We get our scientists, they off Godzilla, and you're thinking, because I'm watching this going, well, how did they justify sequels? And again, the movie heard me, and it's just like Doc said about the tie. I swear this movie hears you. I'm sitting there going, well, how are they going to explain it? And then he drops and then we get some dialogue with the lovebirds, and they're like, oh, and then, she's crying, but at the same time happy because she gets the guy she loves, and the other guy, he became a skeleton. And, and then the dad is sitting there, and I'm like, oh, well, that's going to be the end, huh? And how are they going to explain away the sequels? And just as I asked that question, he goes, if we continue down this path, we will get more creatures and Godzillas like this, or something even worse. And I'm like, oh, damn, thank you.
Yeah, but they already established that the one way to get to defeat Godzilla, no one is ever going to know now, because he took it to the grave with him.
Yep. So they set it up beautifully for sequels without being too hit you in the face for sequels. Which we won't talk about Godzilla raids again.
But Paul,
yes,
the Oxygen Destroyer kind of comes back and kills Godzilla again. 1995.
Yes.
You'll be talking about the Godzilla month. The Godzilla movies we picked for this month are all the ones that are just Godzilla. Just to let you know, folks, and they aren't the versus ones. So even though later on we do get some verses in there, but yeah. So we've picked apart the 54 one, and Dawn, the American one, completely different tone.
Absolutely. They insert, what the heck? They insert Raymond Burr, who is
Stephen Martin.
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin.
Stephen Martin with an N.
Yeah, I watching that now makes me want to start singing King Tut.
He was going to Cairo.
Yes, he was. So, yeah, you got Stephen Martin, journalist, who somehow magically gets connected at the hip to, I wasn't real clear on who that guy was, head of security, chief of police, whatever the heck he was. But this one journalist from the U.S. suddenly miraculously gets connected at the hip with this one official and gets personal escort everywhere and translates for the rest of us plebes what's actually going on and why it's so important to the rest of the world watching it.
Oh, watching this, Don, you mentioned his liaison, if you will, who airport security suddenly follows him everywhere around Tokyo. Did they?
That didn't
it's
bother
the
me
Japanese
quite
Security
much.
Defense Force.
Oh my god, that bothered me not quite as much as the science behind the oxygen destroyer, but it was a close second.
Well, they picked, and Glenn, I imagine, since this is the U.S. version, it came out a couple years later and it's still in the 50s. I imagine that they did it for a number of reasons. Did it seem to you they picked the most American sounding Japanese person in all of Hollywood?
Yes.
What'd you think of his liaison and the lack of subtitles?
there's nothing that I enjoy about this version.
Yeah.
Aw.
And I haven't seen it in years because I don't like it at all. So, I mean, he's not Raymond Burr, so that's good.
Yeah. True. Who seems to be sleepwalking through this whole film.
Well, this was a paycheck. That's all this was for him.
Yeah. I think that was his attempt to look serious and dour to try and match the tone of the original. But yes, he comes across like he's half asleep the entire time instead.
He had a concussion. That's all.
Not earlier in the film for the
At some point
flashbacks he
does,
didn't.
yeah.
His flashback is it's through the eyes of someone with a concussion.
He's remembering himself as if he was concussed.
Concussed.
at the time.
Exactly. Yes.
All right.
Oh, it's preemptive method acting.
Yeah,
It may not be concussion. It might have been Johnny Walker.
Oh,
well, it was something because he had to have his eye covered, and then it wasn't. I'm like, I couldn't believe that they brought him in because they completely cut up the original and insert these Raymond Burr scenes when you're not getting Raymond Burr voiceover. And he's taken to the hospital early in the film, and they intercut with a scene from the hospital that showed up later in Japanese version. And he's got his head bleeding in that. But then we cut away to some scenes from the original, and then we come back, and they got his head all bandaged, including covering his eye. For no particular reason. There was no eye injury evident. He had some blood on his head. And I'm like, what the? And then they had, oh man, Paul.
Yes.
They had stand-in bodies.
Yes. It was like watching Kung Pao enter the fist. Come on. only with technology that was 30 years older. But they couldn't do head replacements, They just had to okay, we're gonna focus on Raymond, and we'll have this stand-in right here. And because it's we're gonna voice over the actors, it's all gonna be good. Yeah.
We'll move the camera to the left. You turn to the right. We'll time it just right. No one will see your face and go.
Yeah, go. And sometimes the voices.
Or in the case of the phone call, we'll just stand you behind a whole bunch of equipment.
Oh, yeah,
and all
exactly.
people will see is the eye patch.
Or remember when they were on the island and it sounded like they were talking inside of a metal box?
Yeah.
That was great.
They probably were. It was called the ADR room.
Yeah, it probably
Hey-o.
was. Oh.
Yeah, the soundproofing wasn't that good in the closet they re-recorded it in.
The bathroom. That was it.
The bathroom. I
The
mean,
acoustics.
you're right about the paycheck because he doesn't. Even when his character sees Godzilla, he's never seen a giant fucking lizard stick its head over the mountain. Yet he plays the saving white guy. Pardon my French, but it's true. And he helps his liaison who fell out of nowhere into the ground and is hurt and now needs to be helped by Raymond Burr. So he's helping his fellow man. But at no time does he show any reaction to the big fucking lizard that's looking at him over the hill.
Exactly.
Doc, what the hell is up with Raymond Burr? He really just he felt like Griswold in Urge of the Dead.
I'm sorry. You seem to have hurt yourself, young man. Do you need a cigarette or a chocolate bar? That's all I have.
Maybe
I heard the currency overseas right now in the war-torn places.
Did you get that feeling though with his character and the scenes he was in? It was like they were trying to make him the hero, but
They try and make him. It's been a while, but they try and make him a hero when he doesn't really have anything he can do because he's just narrating the film.
yeah.
But they want him to look cool while he does it. And it's just there's some stuff where it's just really awkward. Let's give him some business. It'll be great. No, it won't be great.
No. Don, how'd you feel about it? Am I off on this? Is Raymond trying to be the American hero in this film?
Kind of, but it feels more like he is supposed to be the representative American audience to make the Americans feel connected.
Mhm.
But that does, I mean, it in all it really does, at least for me, is make me feel more disassociated and more ineffectual, because he's not really interacting with anybody but with the one person and the stand-ins who are so clearly fake that it just makes you feel even more removed from what's happening, which, you know, puts more guilt about, hey, I'm just here and I'm watching everybody die and I'm watching this country be destroyed and there's nothing I can do because I'm not really part of anything.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes this the Americanization of this film actually worse.
Yeah. Well, and they change Serizawa in this too. They've completely changed his character in this through Raymond Burr's character, Stephen Wright. Excuse me, I blanked on his name there for a minute.
Stephen Martin.
Thank you, Stephen Martin. With his relationship with Serizawa before was this mysterious, dark, crazy scientist, and now Glenn, he's buddies with his American friend.
Yeah.
Did they actually take away and completely change the character just with Raymond Burr's dialogue in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it ruins the original movie.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, not just they crammed, it's like they wanted to cram him in here to have something the American audience can appeal to. It ruins so much of the nuance of the movie, and a lot of the characters, who the characters really are. It just ruins a lot of it.
Yeah, it does. Well, not only that character, but also the love triangle, which was actually a little bit more in the core of the original, and you get more kind of layers and depth with the characters. But Paul, we get, for example, the scene after she gets shown Serizawa's special weapon or whatever. In the original, it's a lot more emotional, but she isn't that emotional. And I forgot what dialogue they gave her in it, but it just changes that love triangle, doesn't it? To where, why did they even try to include it?
Yeah, because I mean the tie-in didn't seem like it was as intense, because when you shove another character basically into the plot, you do kind of water it down a little bit, truthfully, that's what you do. But I didn't really mind having his character in there, and I thought the reason why they had him attached to the Serizawa character was to give Martin a reason for being in the story. And so it was like, okay, yeah, I need to interview someone. You're not going to interview the paleontologist, because why would you? Godzilla wasn't there yet. So, you have to have a reason to be in Japan to interview. And so they said, okay, the mad scientist. Yeah, let's make the mad scientist the reason why he's there. But you're right. His being inserted into that whole triangle sort of made the whole relationship watered down in a way. In fact, the part where you would think, okay, now Raymond Burr is going to go and talk to his friend, they didn't really have that, because he was like, oh no, he's kind of wounded. You guys can do what you did in the original film, because we don't want to reshoot that. So
yeah. But they did, because Raymond Burr's, even with that love triangle, the voiceover at the
was horrible.
end,
yeah.
He ends up changing the relationship between Ogata and Serizawa. Because in the original, as we mentioned, where they whip it out, basically, you got Ogata and Serizawa fighting over who's going to go down, and then they finally reluctantly agree to both go down. And in the Raymond Burr's, you don't get any conflict. He's just like,
yeah.
And not only that, he made it so Serizawa was being kind to Ogata, because the way Raymond Burr narrates that scene, and it's kind of a big scene for that arc in the movie, these two going down and they're both having a love or whatever relationship with the same woman. In this one, he just goes, oh, Serizawa agreed to go with Ogata to deliver the bomb. I'm like, wait, what?
But the whole thing about the Americanized version was that the pacing was very, very different too, and it was quicker. And I did like the pacing of the Americanized version over the Japanese version, but the theme was much better in the original. So, and the pacing doesn't. I don't think it interferes with the theme, or so. I liked the Americanized version's pacing, and having him kind of just diffuse it was a way to get the movie moving faster, I guess.
What were you going to say, Don?
But they're back to that whole change in dynamic of that triangle. One of the things that happened in the original cut was when Serizawa and Ogatu were fighting, and he was very torn and trying to decide what to do about his oxygen destroyer, and finally made the decision to destroy all of his research and use it to destroy Godzilla. When he started burning his paperwork, Emiku started crying.
Yeah.
And because she knew what was going to happen right there. She knew that he was going to martyr himself. And so glossing over all the rest of that completely takes that away. That she knows from that moment that he is going to kill himself. And because that's what he said, the only thing left of his research is in his head. And the only way to assure it would never get in the hands of anybody else would be for him to be destroyed too.
Yeah.
So she knew from there, and that whole interaction between the two of them going down, she knew how it was going to play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does. It waters it down, and it does move faster. I will agree, but that's because the American version is a completely different tone than the Godzilla, the 54 version. It's not as serious. In all honesty, Godzilla King of the Monsters is what people look at and you go, oh yeah, that's a 50s B monster film.
Yeah.
That's what King of Godzilla comes across as, with the cheaply inserted extra scenes with Raymond Burr, and how they re-edit some of the scenes too, so they're not nearly as serious. Godzilla King of the Monsters, Doc, it's more of just a regular straight American B film, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember not, thinking in the times I watched it that it's good for what it is, but it's not a patch on 54. It's not really fair to compare them, really.
No, because in all honesty, they're
very different
films with kind of different intents.
Yeah.
And it's very evident when you watch them back to back, the difference in quality.
Yeah, I've done it. It's like, ooh. But like Paul said, it seems like it goes by very quickly. So it's got that going for it, which is nice.
Yeah. It was just a cash grab, man. It was just a 54 cash grab.
But I mean, remember too, like I mentioned before, the American audience had a way that they were reacting to the war a certain way too, and remember the movie, like that's the whole point of this 50s series was to see how the Americans reacted to it, and we know by watching those movies that they thought radiation behaved differently, and so that's what they did, was they made the Americanized version kind of fit that template.
Yeah. It's going to give you superpowers. Yes.
It's going to give you superpowers. Exactly. It's going to make you look like a vapor,
Could be.
Yeah. Even that was handled differently because in the original, it says that it enhanced a creature that was already.
Yeah. It implies, that it's mutated in an existing creature.
Yeah,
like it's a piranha film, and all of a sudden, an earthquake happens and releases these, weird prehistoric piranhas into the mix by a water park. It's the same vibe from that perspective, certainly.
Yeah, it is. But each one of the original handles it a little more subtly than
it's very light
than the American version, where they don't even say hydrogen bomber, they just go H-bomb.
H-bomb, A-bomb.
So, but we'll wrap it up here. I don't want to go too late, but I think we covered this film well. As you could probably imagine, folks, the 54 version, you watch them both, but you can definitely see the differences, and it gives you an idea of the different approaches to the same subject from two different cultures. It gives you a really good perspective on that. And like we do here with all of our It Came from the 50s series, now I'm going to go down the line really quick and ask our panel each one of them what they learned from Godzilla about the 50s. What did Godzilla teach you from 1954? Dawn?
Oh, me first. Thanks. Always carry a pocket knife.
Nice. Glenn, how about you?
If you develop a weapon to destroy giant monsters, you shouldn't feel bad about using weapons that destroy giant monsters.
Nice. Paul, how about you?
Nature always finds a way to basically push back against man.
Wow, very Ian Malcolm of you. And Doc, how about you? What did you learn?
Raymond Burr, a real American hero. Raymond Burr is there.
I like Raymond.
I'm sorry, I've been sitting on that for like 10 minutes now.
Jesus.
That just painted. I don't think I'll be looking at the opening of the G.I. Joe cartoon the same way now, because now I'm just picturing
he's in control. He's a man who's tough and bold.
I'm just picturing every character looking like Raymond Burr now, including Scarlet and Lady J. Which I know.
Well, that's your own dreams that night. I'm so sorry.
I'll be telling my therapist about later on.
Clearly.
Raymond Burr had boobs. I don't get it.
Well, he did it boobs.
Boobs.
He was a big fella.
That was later on in Perry Mason. But.
Yes.
So I hope you enjoyed our discussion tonight, folks, and are enjoying these that came from the 50s. And yes, it is Godzilla month, so look for more Godzilla films. We'll be talking Godzilla 1985, Godzilla 2000. We'll be talking about carrying actually into April with Shin Godzilla, because I really want to talk about that one.
Yeah.
And yep, it's coming this month. We will be talking about Zilla from 98. So
no clue what you're talking about.
So prepare yourself, folks and friends of the Spoiler Room. Now here's where we go down the aisle and we get these lovely people to tell you where you can find them when they're not here. Dawn?
You can find me in the audience.net.
Fantastic. And Glenn?
You can find me on Facebook with the B-Movie Bunker, Guy in a Bunker Productions. Same thing on YouTube. Find me at guyinabunker.com, at nakedhobo.com. Check out my gaming podcast, Adventure Party, at gncast.com, or just follow me on Twitter at Guy in a Bunker.
Awesome. And Paul?
I encourage everybody to find out more about the project that I'm working on called the Northeast Wisconsin Horror Film Festival at newhorrorfest.com.
And Doctavius.
Okay, before I roll into that, I was trying to use my memory before, and it sucks. So I'm going to try and pronounce this gentleman's name properly as Haru Nakajima, as the suit actor for Godzilla until 1972. So hopefully I got that closer to right. I'm on the Facebook's Professor Thomas Tennant. Next Shakespeare now is not till April, because we just finished last night, as we mentioned before. April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th is Antony and Cleopatra. It's our annual toga party. So if you dress in a toga, you get a $5 admission instead of $10. And by then, the floor should be finished, so we should be back in ballroom or the blue ribbon room again, not in the Great Hall where we have to yell, and that's why my throat hurts. It's got a very high ceiling. There's a lot more yelling involved.
So you're
But
doing
it's a
it
beautiful, beautiful room, but
So you're doing it Greek style.
potentially
Sorry.
depends on who's involved.
Catastrophic economic disaster.
And with that note, we will say adieu, everyone. Tune in, and if you haven't subscribed to us on iTunes, we thank you for listening. Now, say goodnight, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Everyone.
Adieu.
Godzilla!
Gojira.
Godzilla.